For decades, the Sinaloa Cartel sat at the top of the criminal world, a titan of drug trafficking, corruption, money, and violence. And at the center of that empire stood two men whose names became myth long before they ever appeared on a DEA most wanted list: Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera, El Chapo, and Ismael Mario Zambada Garcia, El Mayo. Together, these two shaped modern cartel history. They created roots, toppled rivals, bribed entire systems, and built the Sinaloa Cartel into what many considered the most powerful criminal organization on earth.
De culto, pero por todos los collares, santería que casi nadie trae, por ahí van. Viene el gabacho, se parte el queso pa' la CH y la pizza, puro bélico.
It all began back in 1987, when El Chapo and El Mayo officially came together with Hector Luis Palma Salazar and Juan José Esparragosa Moreno. El Azul. 4 men, 1 vision, and an unlimited appetite for expansion. Their strategy was simple: dominate everything. And for years they did. Shipments flowed across the border. Mountains were carved into secret labs. Airstrips popped up like weeds across the Sierra Madre, and billions of dollars poured into Sinaloa. But none of it came without blood. El Chapo's violent reputation, combined with El Mayo's patience and intelligence, created a perfect storm. Chapo controlled chaos. Mayo controlled everything else. And as law enforcement pressure increased, El Chapo's ability to escape prison again and again turned him into something larger than life. His first escape in 2001 shocked Mexico. His second escape in 2015 humiliated the Mexican government. But the man who could slip through prison walls like smoke finally met his end in 2016 when Mexican authorities caught him near Los Mochis after a brutal firefight. This time, there was no escape tunnel, no bribed guards, no helicopters, nothing. El Chapo was extradited, and eventually, he was sentenced to life in ADX Florence, one of the most unforgiving prisons on the planet, a concrete tomb for men the United States wants forgotten. With Chapo gone, the world expected the Sinaloa Cartel to collapse. Instead, something else happened. El Mayo Zambada, the ghost of the mountains, the man who had never spent a single night in prison, stepped forward. His plan wasn't violence. It was survival, and he knew that the only way to keep the cartel intact was to bring in fresh leadership. So Mayo gave power to Chapo's sons Ivan Archibaldo Guzman Salazar, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, Joaquin Guzman Lopez, and Ovidio Guzman Lopez. Together, they became Los Chapitos. They established their base in Culiacan and expanded into other states, rapidly gaining influence. They pioneered the importation of fentanyl precursors to manufacture and traffic fentanyl across the globe. Their style was different from their fathers, flashier, younger, more unpredictable, but they had something Mayo needed: the loyalty of their father's people and the ability to energize a new generation of sicarios and operators. But time doesn't stop for anyone. El Mayo grew older. His health deteriorated, his diabetes worsened, and he retreated further into the mountains of Sinaloa to avoid capture. With him mostly absent, the internal structure of the cartel began shifting. Other bosses, once merely supportive players, suddenly had voices that mattered. One of them was Aureliano Guzman Loera, El Guano, Chapo's brother and the leader of Los Guanos, a faction controlling key parts of the Golden Triangle. Another rising influence was Ismael Zambada Siqueiros, El Mayito Flaco, who had stepped into the role of managing day-to-day operations for Los Mayos as his father's condition worsened. Dozens of other operators, negotiators, and plaza bosses became increasingly important, and for a while, everything held together thanks to Mayo's ability to keep everyone aligned. But then, in a single moment, everything changed.
Two leaders of a notorious Mexican drug cartel are now behind bars in the U.S.
Two of the most powerful kingpins in Mexico's infamous Sinaloa drug cartel in U.S. custody today, tricked into boarding a plane that ended up bringing them to El Paso, Texas, and into the hands of the feds. Authorities say the drug bosses are behind massive operations pumping fentanyl into the U.S. Ismael Zambada Garcia, known in the drug world as El Mayo, one of the most wanted men on the planet, now in U.S. custody, along with Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the son of the notorious El Chapo, who co-founded the cartel with his dad and evaded arrest for decades, despite the $15 million bounty.
He is facing charges for fentanyl trafficking, money laundering, firearms offenses, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder.
El Mayo Zambada, the last old-school titan, was captured. His arrest sent shockwaves through the entire criminal world. It was the end of an era, and everyone knew it. What nobody knew was that it would also be the spark that ignited the most violent cartel conflict Mexico had seen in years, a conflict that would rip Sinaloa apart from the inside. In the days following Mayo's arrest, uncertainty spread like wildfire. Rumors, betrayals, quiet meetings in ranches and safe houses. Everyone wanted to know what would happen now that the man who held everything together was gone. And it didn't take long for the answer to appear. El Mayito Flaco, Mayo's son, made the first move. He blamed Los Chapitos for betraying his father and handing him over to U.S. authorities. And whether that accusation was true or not, didn't matter. What mattered was that he believed it. And with that belief came a decision that would reshape the cartel forever. Mayito Flaco declared war. Los Mayos and their allies on one side, Los Chapitos on the other. Two of the most powerful factions in the Sinaloa Cartel, now enemies. Violence hit Sinaloa immediately. Checkpoints, ambushes, disappearances, gunfights on the highway. The state turned into a battlefield. And the war did not stay local. It spread into Baja California, into Durango, and into Sonora. Alliances shifted. Old friendships shattered. And what had once been one unified cartel broke into two massive factions clawing at each other for power. This was the beginning of the Sinaloa split. And as 2025 began, the conflict only grew bloodier. In January, one of the most devastating early blows hit Los Mayos, the capture of Juan Carlos Felix Gastelum, Chavo Felix, Mayo's son-in-law, and considered a future leader of the faction. Authorities caught him in Quila, Sinaloa, a humiliating loss for La Mayiza in the early stages of the war. But Chapiza didn't escape untouched. Just weeks later, rumors exploded online that Juan Luis Castro Morales, El Gavilan, had been killed. As the jefe de sicarios for Los Chapitos, Gavilan was one of the most feared figures in northern Mexico. Corridos glorified him. Rivals hated him, and his men followed him without hesitation. His reported death sent shockwaves through Culiacan and beyond, marking a significant hit to Chapiza's operations. Meanwhile, the conflict broadened. Baja California turned into a secondary war zone as La Mayiza aligned forces under El Lucifer and El Babe clashed with Chapiza's ally El René 00.
La alianza del Cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación y la Chapiza está confirmada. Pura gente del señor Mecho y del señor Iván. ¡Pura gente del señor
Chapiza pulled in reinforcements from CJNG, specifically from Los Jardineros under Audias Flores Silva. La Mayisa secured support from the Cartel de Guasave, led by the notorious Fausto Isidro Meza Flores, El Chapo Isidro. At the same time, cracks formed inside Chapitos itself, with Joaquin Guzman Lopez and Ovidio Guzman Lopez in U.S. custody. Ovidio began cooperating with American authorities. His testimony secured legal protections for his immediate family and 17 relatives, granting them American residency and safety in the United States. The decision triggered outrage inside the organization and caused multiple high-ranking Chapiza operators to defect, some joining La Mayisa, others moving under Chapo Isidro. Those defections changed the balance of the war. La Mayisa and the Cartel de Guasave gained massive ground in northern Sinaloa and the outskirts of Culiacan. In May 2025, federal forces raided a home in Navolato. A fierce shootout followed, and the result was the death of Jorge Humberto Figueroa Benitez, El Paris or El 27, the leader of Los Chimales, and a major figure in Los Chapitos' armed wing. His influence, like Gavilan's, had made him a symbol, and his death struck hard. All the while, attacks escalated in Sonora, Durango, and Baja California Mantas, kidnappings, drone strikes, executions. The war consumed everything in its path. And yet, the biggest shift was still to come. Because the Sinaloa Cartel wasn't just splitting in two. Another faction was about to break away completely. As the war between Los Chapitos and Los Mayos tightened its grip on Sinaloa, the ripple effects began pushing long-standing alliances to their breaking points. For years, the Sinaloa Cartel functioned like a federation. Dozens of groups united under one banner, each controlling their own territory, their own networks, their own money. It was never a single monolithic army. It was a collection of powerful families and factions tied together by convenience, profit, and the old-school leadership of El Mayo. But once the war erupted, those ties started snapping. Groups that had once operated smoothly under the Sinaloa umbrella now found themselves stuck in the crossfire of a feud they didn't start. Some remained neutral, some were forced to choose sides, and others simply walked away. One of the biggest fractures came from Sonora. For years, Los Salazar, one of the most strategic and disciplined groups in the Sinaloa Cartel, operated as Sinaloa's iron fist in the region. They controlled smuggling corridors, ran extortion networks, and fought rival organizations like Los Matasalas with brutal efficiency. But as the internal war escalated, Los Salazar, along with Los Cazadores and Los Pelones, decided they had no interest in bleeding for either Chapiza or Mayisa. So they split. They formed the Cartel Independiente de Sonora, the Independent Cartel of Sonora, a brand new organization born directly from the chaos inside Sinaloa. And in a matter of months, they seized control of key plazas across the state, fortifying themselves as a third major force in northern Mexico. Their move didn't just weaken Sinaloa. It exposed just how fragile the old alliances really were. While Sonora was reshaping itself, the situation in the Golden Triangle grew even more volatile. In the mountains of Badiraguato, a region soaked in history, where legends like Chapo and Mayo built their empires, a new threat began to take shape. For most of the conflict, Aureliano Guzman Loera, El Guano, kept his distance. He operated quietly, avoided taking sides, and focused on protecting his own roots. But neutrality is a luxury you only keep until someone challenges your land. And that challenge came from Los Musicos, a crew working under Chapo Isidro and Cartel de Guasave. Led by Oscar Manuel Gastelum Iribe, El Músico, the group launched attacks into Guano's territory, targeting ranches, safe houses, and mountain corridors. The assaults forced Guano to abandon his neutral stance and align himself more closely with Los Chapitos. Suddenly, the quiet mountain boss was pulled into the center of the war, fighting alongside his nephews to defend the birthplace of their criminal empire. Meanwhile, violence continued erupting across Sinaloa. Towns that had been peaceful for years were now caught in constant shootouts. Highways turned into battlegrounds. Columns of sicarios moved through the countryside in armored trucks. And overhead, drones were deployed regularly, both for surveillance and for dropping explosives. One incident made headlines worldwide. A drone strike targeted the ranch once owned by El Chapo's mother, provoking outrage from Chapitos and signaling just how far the conflict had escalated. This wasn't just a war fought with rifles and convoys anymore. It was a war waged with technology, strategy, and propaganda, each side eager to expose the other's vulnerabilities. But in September 2025, another event shook La Mayiza to its core. In Culiacan, Mexican military forces conducted a large-scale operation. Their target was Rafael Guadalupe Felix Núñez, better known as El Changuito Antrax. He wasn't just any operator, he was the leader of the once infamous Los Antrax, the elite sicario group founded by El Chino Antrax, who himself had been murdered in 2020. Changuito Antrax was considered one of Mayito Flaco's most loyal followers, a trafficker with deep connections and an important power base. Cornered during the raid, Changuito tried to flee by diving into a nearby river, but he couldn't swim. He drowned before authorities could pull him out. The death of Changuito Antrax was a symbol, a reminder that even the most feared men can fall in the least dramatic ways. And it was yet another blow to Los Mayos during a year already full of losses. But despite the casualties on both sides, there was no sign of a truce, no sign of negotiations, no sign that anyone wanted peace. The conflict tore through Mexico like a hurricane. Shootouts in daylight, kidnappings in major cities, convoys rolling through rural communities, mantas threatening rivals and exposing supposed betrayals. Waves of propaganda videos uploaded online to boost morale or terrify enemies. The Sinaloa Cartel, once a unified superpower, was now a fractured cluster of armies, all fighting for different visions of the future. And then, while the war raged on the ground, something else happened far away in the United States.
For the first time, cartel kingpin El Mencho tonight is a $15 million man. That is the U.S. government reward just increased and placed on the head of Ruben Aseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho.
He's a very powerful trafficker in Mexico, and he has cells all over the world.
The file on El Mencho bulging in recent years as his new generation cartel seized control of Chicago's street drug sales, and with the territory came wholesale bloodshed here and there. Mencho facing federal indictments in Chicago and other U.S. cities, still on the lam in Mexico and still overseeing a multi-billion-dollar empire.
American officials announced that the CJNG, the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generation, had officially surpassed Sinaloa as the most powerful drug cartel in the world. Years earlier, such a statement would have been unthinkable. Sinaloa had dominated global narcotics for decades, outlasting rivals through discipline, strategy, and deep political ties. But now, with internal war tearing the organization apart, Sinaloa's dominance was fading. Chapiza and Mayiza were focused on killing each other rather than expanding. Neutral factions were leaving the organization entirely, and valuable routes were being lost to Guasave, to CJNG, or to independent groups stepping into the power vacuum. Mexico's once invincible cartel empire was crumbling from the inside, and the world was watching. Still, even as Sinaloa weakened, neither side showed any intention of backing down. The Chapitos fought with the aggression of a generation raised on social media, narco corridos, and a legacy they felt entitled to defend. Los Mayos fought with the discipline and strategy inherited from El Mayo himself, determined to protect the old ways and avenge what they believed was a betrayal. The war was no longer just about territory or money. It was about identity, about loyalty, about whose version of Sinaloa would survive. And as 2025 unfolded, the conflict was only growing more violent and far more unpredictable. The war between Los Chapitos and Los Mayos has now reshaped the entire criminal landscape of northern Mexico. What began as a quiet internal dispute over loyalty, strategy, and the capture of El Mayo Zambada has exploded into a nationwide conflict, one that is tearing apart what was once the single most powerful drug empire on earth. With Los Chapitos losing high-ranking operators like El Gavilan and El Paris, the faction's military strength took major blows. And with Ovidio Guzman testifying in U.S. courts to secure green cards and safe passage for his immediate family and 17 relatives, internal trust inside Los Chapitos shattered. Some of their most trusted operatives defected, crossing over to La Mayisa or joining Chapo Isidro's people, strengthening both rival sides as the war intensified. At the same time, Los Mayos and their allies weren't immune to setbacks. The capture of Chavo Felix in early 2025, the death of El Changuito Antrax during a military raid in Quila, and the growing pressure on Mayito Flaco's leadership all chipped away at the faction's dominance. Every hit, every arrest, every death rippled across Sinaloa, emboldening enemies and weakening long-standing power structures. But the collapse of unity inside Sinaloa didn't just create two sides, it created many more. Los Salazars, once one of the most loyal arms of the Sinaloa Cartel, broke off completely. Joined by Los Cazadores and Los Pelones, they formed the Cartel Independiente de Sonora, taking control of large areas of Sonora and opening a new front in the already fractured narco landscape. Their war against Los Matasalas added yet another violent layer to a conflict that was already spiraling beyond control. Meanwhile, alliances shifted rapidly. Los Chapitos secured support from the CJNG's Los Jardineros, who sent gunmen north to help battle La Mayisa and challenge Los Cabreras in Durango, one of the strongest and most loyal pillars of the Mayo-aligned structure. In response, La Mayisa strengthened ties with Cartel de Guasave under El Chapo Isidro, giving them enough manpower to push deep into northern Sinaloa and even into the outskirts of Culiacan. The violence spread like wildfire. Drone strikes hit ranches once owned by El Chapo's mother. Shootouts erupted in Badiraguato, Navolado, Culiacan, and the mountains of the Golden Triangle. Propaganda videos, mantas, kidnappings, executions. Every tool of psychological warfare was used. And even factions that once avoided the conflict, like El Guano's group, were eventually dragged into the battlefield after Los Musicos attacked their mountain territories. By late 2025, the split was undeniable. The Sinaloa Cartel, once unified under giants like El Mayo and El Chapo, no longer existed as one coalition. It was now two major armies, multiple smaller factions, and several independent drug trafficking networks all fighting for power, territory, and influence. And then came the announcement that changed everything. In September 2025, U.S. authorities officially declared the CJNG as the most powerful drug cartel in the world, overtaking the once dominant Sinaloa Cartel for the first time in decades. Years of infighting, betrayals, arrests, and leadership fractures had weakened the organization that once controlled nearly half the hemisphere's drug routes. But even weakened, Sinaloa remains far from defeated. Both Los Chapitos and Los Mayos still command thousands of gunmen, deep political corruption, cross-border influence, and decades-old smuggling infrastructure. Their war may have destroyed the unity that once made the cartel unrivaled, but it also created the deadliest and most unpredictable battlefield Mexico has seen in years. And the question now is simple: who will rise from the chaos? Because in Sinaloa, nothing stays the same for long. And as long as power, territory, and billions of dollars are on the line, the war between Los Chapitos, Los Mayos, and the new independent factions has only one future. It will continue. And it will shape the next generation of Mexico's narco world.